is the 49ers plan with Deebo Samuel a smart one, or is it doomed for failure? There's a lot of hope and optimism going around right now.
Well, that's a good. That's the ultimate question in some ways, right? It's only doomed for failure if the Niners or Deebo are not honest with each other. If they're somehow dishonest, if the Niners say, Deebo, we're not going to use you in short yardage. We're not going to use you as a running back. We're going to use you mostly as a receiver. We'll only use you as a running back in small doses. And if they go away from that, then I think they're going to have a problem. I think they're going to have a problem. Or if they go back to the bargaining table and they hold to their number. Hey, you know what? We're not giving you a penny over $45 million guaranteed. Take it or leave it. Then I think he's going to hold out and he's going to do just enough to make the contract elapse, and the whole thing can potentially blow up in their face because they've got a player who's not really committed. He's just committed to getting to free agency. So that, to me, is if they're honest with each other, I think it works out. If they somehow try to, I'm going to get my way any way possible, even if I've got to maneuver things and be somewhat dishonest or speak out of both sides of my mouth, then I think it's crash and burn time.
I wonder how he walks this all back with his teammates. He hasn't really come out and said a lot publicly, but seems like a bad look. What does he say? So I think he has to do a little, like, if he comes back, he has to mend some fences, because I thought he was going scorched earth for a little bit. It looked like he was working hard to burn the bridge, and he might come back. So he might have to say something to his teammates and coaches. There's that. I don't know.
I personally, Grant, just from being around, I know you've been around these players a lot as well. But my thing is that these guys compartmentalize all of this. I mean, you could literally do anything you want and say almost anything you want in the effort to get your money. And players won't judge you for it. They'll compartmentalize it as, hey, that's what Deebo had to do to get his money. He doesn't owe me an apology. He doesn't owe me a backtracking of comments. All I care about is he got his money and we're going forward. I think, yeah, normally when you as you say, scorched earth, there's some, you have got to make amends in a real world, but this is not a real world. This is NFL world. And, I think the players compartmentalize this stuff and give each other a wide berth on what's acceptable during contract negotiations.
It seems like if the Niners give Deebo Samuel the $25 million a year, he'll be happy. I think maybe he could chalk up this drama as being a success. I threw a fit. The Niners probably weren't going to go over 22. I got him to meet me on my terms. Good. Win. He didn't become the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, but maybe he looks at it as like, well, it was successful. I had to do what I had to do. So there could be that.
I think he does. I think that's probably a good read on your part. And I don't think there's going to be any. I mean, when I say I don't think there's going to be any, I don't think there's going to be an ounce of resentment towards the player, pushback from other players. There'll be no locker room incidents. There'll be no words spoken. As I said, these guys, players give each other a huge wide berth when it comes to. They're all on the same team. Ultimately, when it comes to dealing for trying to get your money in the NFL with no guaranteed contracts.
Fred Warner's even spoke to that. He spoke to it a couple of weeks ago. He said, look, we've all gone through this. We know it's very uncomfortable and it sometimes makes you upset. Seems like Deebo's upset. I think they all understand and they'll probably let it go. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is interesting, the last thing I want to talk about with you is I feel like you were making the argument, and it was convincing, that really the Niners should trade Deebo not because of how he's acting, but because of his playing style and lack of maybe longevity. I mean, is the plan to just invest and keep Deebo doomed for failure in the sense that, I mean, I guess we don't know, but that's the follow-up with the question. Like, is this a long-term investment?
Yeah, it's not doomed for failure, but what they ultimately resulted in here, Grant, is they're getting their asset back, but the asset that they had was more valuable than the asset they're getting back. Because the asset that they had was a guy who they could use as a running back. And now he's pushed back to a level where they had to draft the LSU kid and watch. They won't use him as a running back. And if he's not being utilized as a running back, are you getting the full value of Deebo Samuel? I mean, he led the league in drops, and he's not one of the greatest receivers in the league. He's one of the awesome run after the catch guys. So if you're not going to use him as a running back, in my opinion, you've devalued the player to some degree. But that might be the price you got to pay to keep everybody happy and keep this thing going forward.
I think it's it's always going to be like 2020 hindsight, but you got to remember that the Niners could have traded Deebo for the 10th pick this year. They could have,
Right.
they would have had to send something back, but they could have had their choice of any wide receiver other than Drake London. And they didn't want him. So we'll always have to sort of second guess that decision. Maybe they made the right one. We shall see what Deebo Samuel's career looks like going forward.